Arav adjusted his tie nervously as he stood near the entrance of the grand wedding hall. Chandni's wedding, it was as extravagant as everyone had expected. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, the scent of fresh flowers filled the air, and guests in designer outfits mingled with glasses of champagne in hand. It was the kind of wedding Arav had dreamed of attending, not as a guest, but under very different circumstances. He remembered the first time he had met Chandni back in college. She had been brilliant, beautiful, and impossibly confident, while he, in contrast, had been a struggling student trying to figure out life. Despite the differences, there had been a connection, a flirtation, a spark, a moment where he had imagined what it would be like to stand beside her. Life, however, had been cruel. After graduation, his attempts to establish a career in tech had failed spectacularly. Investments went wrong, startups collapsed, and he had watched his peers rise around him while he struggled to keep his apartment and pay bills. Chandni, on the other hand, had thrived. She had married into wealth and prestige, securing a life of luxury. And now, he had received an invitation to her wedding, an invitation that felt like an open wound. Arav entered the hall, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Friends from college waved, offering polite smiles and small talk. He nodded, but his mind was on Chandni. She was stunning in her red lehenga, adorned with gold embroidery and sparkling jewelry. But there was a sharpness in her smile that sent a chill down his spine. As he walked closer to the main seating area, Chandni spotted him. Her face lit up, mockingly. She approached, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Oh, Arav, look at you," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I can't believe you showed up." "Still doing your little projects?" Arav stiffened. "Yes, I'm here for the celebration." Chandni laughed, a sound meant to entertain the crowd around her. "Celebration? Really? You mean celebrating that you, well, let's say, haven't exactly succeeded yet?" The words hit him like a punch to the stomach. The guests around them snickered politely, some whispering, others holding back laughter. Arav forced a smile. "Chandni, I'm happy for you," he said quietly, trying not to show the sting. Her eyes gleamed with malice. "Of course you are. You're always so supportive of other people's success, even when you've had, let's say, less fortunate outcomes yourself." The bride continued, louder this time, so nearby tables could hear. "I mean, Arav tried, bless him, but let's be honest, nothing worked out, did it? Not the company, not the anything." Arav's stomach churned. Guests glanced over, some amused, some awkward, some uncomfortable. Friends who had once been close avoided eye contact, unsure how to react. The laughter echoed in his ears like a cruel symphony. He clenched his fists, his heart racing. All the years of struggle, all the sleepless nights and failed ventures, all the hope he had poured into his dreams, reduced to a punchline at Chandni's wedding. He wanted to walk away, vanish into the shadows, escape the humiliation. And yet, something inside him resisted, something he couldn't name, but that little spark, the part that hadn't yet given up, told him he would not be defeated in front of her or anyone else. As the reception progressed, Arav moved to a quieter corner of the hall, away from Chandni and her entourage. His fingers drummed against the table. He had no idea what he would do next. He had no funds, no major backers, no credibility. At least not yet. It was then that a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Not an easy evening, is it?" Arav looked up to see a man in his early 50s, dressed sharply in a tailored suit. He had an aura of quiet confidence, with piercing eyes that seemed to see right through Arav. "You could say that," Arav replied cautiously. The man smiled slightly. "I couldn't help but notice the tension over there." "You're Arav, right? Arav Mehra?" "Yes, that's me," Arav said, suspicious. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," the man said, "but I've been looking for someone with your Persistence. He gestured subtly toward the wedding chaos. You've been underestimated, dismissed, mocked, and yet you're still standing. That tells me more than any resume ever could. Arav blinked, unsure whether to laugh or feel suspicious. And you are? Call me Mr. Rao, the man said. I invest in people who have grit, people who others write off too quickly. I think you might be one of them. Mr. Rao reached into his pocket and handed Arav a card. I want to meet you tomorrow. No pressure. I just want to see what you're capable of. And if I like what I see, I think I can help you change things. Arav held the card, staring at the elegant writing. He couldn't believe it. All day, he had felt invisible, humiliated, like his life was a failure. And now, a complete stranger, a potential investor with influence and money, was offering a lifeline. Why me? Arav asked quietly, almost afraid to hope. Because, Mr. Rao said, with a look that sent shivers down his spine, I can see what Chandni cannot. And I invest in people who dare to rise, no matter what others think. Arav nodded slowly, feeling a mix of disbelief, excitement, and fear. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight, he had to survive the rest of the wedding without losing his composure. Back at the reception, Chandni had moved on, unaware of the encounter. She floated among her guests, smiling, basking in admiration. Yet something had shifted. Arav no longer felt powerless, no longer felt humiliated. The spark of possibility had ignited within him. He smiled faintly to himself. Let her mock. Let her assume he was a failure. The night was not over, and neither was he. Tomorrow, he would meet Mr. Rao. Tomorrow, things could begin to turn in his favor, and for the first time in years, Arav allowed himself to feel a sense of control, a sense that his story was not yet finished. Chandni's laughter at his failed career was nothing more than noise. The real game, he realized, was about to begin. The morning sunlight streamed through Arav's small apartment, illuminating the cluttered desk, where his laptop sat, still displaying the email drafts he had never sent. The previous night's humiliation at Chandni's wedding had left him restless, replaying every word, every mocking glance, every laugh as if they had been etched into his mind. Yet strangely, amid the anger and shame there was a spark, something unfamiliar, hope. He had barely slept, thinking about the man who had approached him at the wedding. Mr. Rao, a stranger, yet somehow commanding attention simply by being present. His words echoed in Arav's mind. I invest in people who have grit, people who others write off too quickly. Could someone actually see past Chandni's mockery, past the label of failure? Arav felt a flicker of possibility. By noon, Arav found himself walking to the address Mr. Rao had provided, tucked away in a sleek building that exuded understated wealth. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and minimalist design, the kind of place Arav had once dreamed of entering, not as a visitor, but as someone respected, someone capable. He hesitated for a moment before stepping into the elevator. His palms were clammy, his heart racing. What if he disappointed this man too? What if he had misread the invitation? And yet, he reminded himself that the only way to reclaim dignity was to act. Mr. Rao greeted him personally, smiling in a way that was calm but assessing. Arav, he said, extending a hand. I've been expecting you. Thank you for seeing me, Arav replied, shaking the firm hand and noting the warmth behind the grip. Seeing you, Mr. Rao said, isn't the same as judging you. I know what you're capable of, if given the right guidance, the right platform. He gestured for AA. Rav to sit in a comfortable leather chair. Tell me, Arav, what really happened with your career? Arav exhaled, the weight of years of failure pressing down on him. He recounted the series of setbacks, the startups that failed, the investors who pulled out at the last minute, the long nights and empty promises. He expected sympathy, But instead, Mr. Rao listened carefully without interruption, nodding thoughtfully. "You've experienced setbacks," Mr. Rao said finally, leaning back. "But you haven't lost the one thing that counts: persistence. Most people crumble after one failure, two at most. You've survived many. That is rare. That is valuable." Arav felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. Rarely had anyone framed his struggles as strengths rather than weaknesses. For the first time in years, he didn't feel small. "I want to give you an opportunity," Mr. Rao continued. "I've been investing in a series of technology ventures. I'm looking for someone to lead a project, a new platform that could change the market if executed correctly. But I need someone with vision, patience, and grit. That's you, Arav." The words felt surreal. His mind raced with questions, doubts, and possibilities. "Why me? Why now?" he asked cautiously. "Because most people are intimidated by failure," Mr. Rao replied. "They fear it. You've faced it, embraced it, and survived it. That makes you perfect for this project. Are you ready to step up?" Arav swallowed hard. I want to. I need a chance to prove I'm not a failure." "Good," Mr. Rao said with a small smile. "Tomorrow we start. I'll provide resources, contacts, and mentorship. But you have to act with decisiveness. No hesitation, no excuse. Seize. Understood?" "Understood," Arav said firmly, feeling a surge of determination. The following days were a whirlwind. Arav worked closely with Mr. Rao, immersing himself in planning, strategy, and networking. For the first time in years, he felt capable. Ideas he had abandoned years ago suddenly became viable with proper guidance and capital. He learned to pitch, to negotiate, to think strategically. Each small success reinforced his confidence. Meanwhile, news of Chandni's wedding and Arav's presence had spread through their social circle. His humiliation had been brief, but now, a quiet undercurrent of curiosity and gossip began circulating. The man she mocked was no longer the same. People who had laughed now whispered, unsure of what had changed. Arav remained focused. Chandni's mockery no longer had power over him. Instead, it became fuel. Every setback, every insult, every dismissal was now motivation. And he knew that soon he would have the resources and platform to demonstrate what he was truly capable of. One evening, while Arav and Mr. Rao were reviewing proposals for the new venture, Arav's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from a mutual friend. "Chandni asked about you. She's heard rumors you're working on something big. People are talking." Arav smiled faintly. For the first time, he felt in control of the narrative. He no longer feared ridicule. Instead, the future looked bright, full of potential. The night ended with Arav reflecting on the strange turn of events. Just a week ago, he had been publicly humiliated, standing as a failed career in front of Chandni, her guests, and even family members. Now, he was embarking on a venture with an influential investor, a chance to reclaim not just financial stability, but self-respect. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy. The road to success was never linear, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he acknowledged a quiet, unspoken truth. One day, Chandni's laughter would be meaningless, and he would be standing on his own terms, confident and victorious. The weeks that followed were a blur of strategy sessions, late-night calls, and meetings that tested Arav in ways he hadn't imagined. Under Mr. Rao's guidance, he learned not just how to pitch ideas, but how to anticipate obstacles, manage expectations, and leverage his own experiences as strengths rather than weaknesses. For the first time in years, failure felt like a distant memory instead of a defining label. The new venture was ambitious, a tech platform designed to connect small businesses with niche investors, solving a problem Arav himself had faced during his early failed attempts. Every challenge he had ever encountered became a stepping stone, He could now see the gaps he had once stumbled over, and he was determined not to repeat the same mistakes. Arav's confidence grew steadily, and with it, tangible progress. Within weeks, the platform had secured early investors, and the buzz around it began spreading in tech circles. The man who had once been ridiculed as a failed entrepreneur was now being consulted, praised, and sought after for insights. Invitations to speak at conferences, mentor younger startups, and join high-profile networking dinners started filling his calendar. And yet, amid the growing success, a quiet satisfaction stirred within him. It wasn't the money, the accolades, or the opportunities that thrilled him. It was the shift from being overlooked to being seen, from being mocked to being respected. He had survived humiliation, endured rejection, and emerged stronger. Every setback from the past became fuel, not a burden. Then one afternoon a notification appeared in his inbox, a LinkedIn connection request from Chandni. His stomach tightened at first, memories of her wedding mockery flooding back. But now, instead of fear or shame, there was curiosity and a faint sense of anticipation. He accepted the request and found a brief message attached. "Bah, heard you're doing well. Impressive, Bar." Arav read it twice. Impressive? A word she had likely never used about him sincerely in the past. His pulse quickened, but he remained composed. He could feel the subtle power of this moment she was noticing, and it was no longer in her control. It was in his. Next day, during a networking lunch, Arav received a call from Mr. Rao. "How's everything going?" the investor asked casually. Arav smiled. "Better than I ever imagined. The platform is gaining traction faster than we projected. Investors are impressed. And I think I finally have the momentum to launch on a larger scale." Arav's voice held a note of satisfaction. "Good. That's the kind of progress that changes perception, not just numbers. People will start to take notice, and those who doubted you will realize what you've achieved on your own terms." Arav leaned back, thinking of Chandni and the wedding. He no longer felt the sting of her ridicule. Instead, he imagined the moment she would realize her assumptions had been entirely wrong. That day, he reflected, would be immensely satisfying, but not out of revenge. It would be the simple power of success proving itself. As the platform launched to wider acclaim, Arav began receiving recognition in unexpected ways. Articles highlighted his journey from repeated setbacks to innovative solutions. Tech blogs lauded his resilience. Even former colleagues reached out, expressing admiration. Each message reminded him that public perception had shifted. He was no longer the failed career that Chandni had mocked, but a figure of determination, innovation, and leadership. Chandni's messages became more frequent. Small notes of admiration, professional inquiries, and subtle attempts to reconnect filtered through his inbox. Arav, however, remained polite but distant. He had learned that power lay not just in success, but in the ability to control access to it. One afternoon, at a major tech conference, Arav stepped onto the stage to present his platform. The room, packed with industry leaders and investors, fell silent as he spoke. His voice carried confidence, experience, and authority. Each slide, each statistic, and each anecdote reflected his journey, not just his ideas, but his hard-earned credibility. After the presentation, as he walked through the crowd, he caught sight of a familiar figure. Chandni had attended, clearly drawn by curiosity and perhaps lingering pride in her earlier assumptions. She approached cautiously, her expression unreadable, a polite smile on her lips. "Impressive work, Arav," she said, her tone careful. "I didn't expect this." Arav returned a calm smile. "Thank you, Chandni. It's taken a lot of learning, persistence, and mentorship. But here we are." Her eyes flickered briefly with something akin to surprise, maybe even regret. For the first time, he realized that her perception of him had shifted, not because he had sought her approval, but because his actions had spoken louder than any words she had mocked him with. That evening, as he returned home, Arav reflected on the transformation. The humiliation at her wedding, once so painful, now felt like a distant catalyst that had propelled him toward growth. Mr. Rao's intervention had been the spark, but it had been his own dedication, his refusal to be defined by others, that had truly carried him forward. He reviewed the progress of the platform on his laptop, noting investors' positive feedback and the growing user base. Each small victory reinforced his confidence, but also reminded him of the lessons he had learned. Persistence, humility, patience, and self-respect were far more valuable than immediate validation or approval. Late that night, a notification appeared. Another message from Chandni. "Would you consider a collaboration?" Arav read it slowly, a calm satisfaction settling over him. He realized that he was no longer desperate to prove anything to her. He could choose how, when, or if he responded. The power had shifted entirely. He typed a brief reply, "Thank you, I'll consider it carefully." It was concise, polite, and measured, the exact tone of someone who had reclaimed control of his life. For the first time in years, he felt a quiet pride not for what others thought of him, but for what he had accomplished on his own terms. As Arav finally lay in bed that night, he reflected on how a single moment of mockery had sparked a chain of events that reshaped his life. Chandni's laughter no longer mattered. What mattered was the opportunity, the guidance of Mr. Rao, and his own relentless determination. He had risen from humiliation to respect, from failure to recognition, and from despair to confidence. And in that moment, he understood a truth that would guide him forever. The people who mock you are rarely the ones who define your destiny. The choices you make, the persistence you demonstrate, and the integrity you uphold will always speak louder than their laughter. Arav closed his eyes, ready for the challenges and triumphs yet to come, fully aware that the future now belonged to him. The months following the platform's launch were a whirlwind of unexpected achievements. Arav found himself traveling to conferences, meeting with influential investors, and giving interviews that highlighted his innovative ideas and unique approach to problem solving. Each day brought more recognition, and every milestone reinforced the reality that he had moved far beyond the shadow of his past failures. Chandni's messages became more frequent, ranging from casual curiosity to veiled attempts at flattery. The woman who had mocked him publicly now sought insight, seemingly impressed by his progress. But Arav's perspective had shifted. He no longer felt the need to prove anything to her. The humiliation at her wedding had been a catalyst, a painful turning point, but it no longer held power over him. He was building something meaningful, independent of anyone's approval. At a major tech expo, Arav presented the platform to an audience of hundreds. His voice rang with confidence, each explanation clear and precise. Investors leaned forward, captivated by his vision. The features he had painstakingly developed, the business strategies refined with Mr. Rao, and the personal experiences he had endured, combined to create a presentation that was impossible to ignore. After the presentation, as he mingled with attendees, a familiar voice interrupted his flow. "I must admit, I didn't expect this," Chandni said, approaching with a polite smile. Her eyes, usually sharp with judgment, now reflected something else: curiosity, surprise, perhaps even respect. Arav looked at her calmly. "Thank you, Chandni. I've been working hard. It seems to be paying off." She hesitated, clearly uncertain how to continue. "I heard a lot about your platform. People are impressed. I guess I misjudged you back then." Arav smiled faintly. "It's interesting how perceptions change when people take the time to see the bigger picture. Thank you for noticing." Her expression shifted, a mix of embarrassment and admiration. Arav felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her assumptions had been shattered, not through confrontation, but through consistent effort and measurable success. Word of Arav's achievements spread quickly. Industry blogs wrote glowing reviews, investors sought interviews, and even former classmates reached out to congratulate him. What had begun as whispers now became headlines. The failed entrepreneur who had risen from humiliation to prominence. For Arav, the tangible success was satisfying, but the real triumph lay in reclaiming his dignity. He no longer carried the weight of Chandni's ridicule. He was recognized not for what he had lost or failed at, but for what he had created, nurtured, and achieved through perseverance. One evening, after a particularly long day, Mr. Rao called. "Arav, you've done well," he said warmly. "I knew you had it in you. You've not only rebuilt your career but also demonstrated the resilience that few possess. The best part? This is just the beginning. Your trajectory is unstoppable now." Arav exhaled, a mixture of relief and pride flooding through him. He thought back to Chandni's wedding, the laughter, the pointed remarks, and the sting of public humiliation. That memory, once sharp and painful, now felt like a catalyst for transformation, a necessary push that had forced him to rise. The next milestone came unexpectedly. Arav's platform secured a multi-million-dollar investment from a prominent venture fund. The news was covered extensively in the media. Headlines celebrated his ingenuity, highlighting the story of perseverance, grit, and innovation. Arav watched the coverage quietly, thinking of the journey that had led him here, the mistakes, the failures, the moments of doubt, and the support of Mr. Rao. Chandni inevitably caught wind of the news. She reached out again, this time with a tone that was careful, almost conciliatory. "Arav, congratulations. I didn't realize how much you had accomplished. You've really exceeded expectations." Arav read the message and paused. He felt a flicker of something, a mix of validation and calm satisfaction, but he didn't rush to reply. Instead, he allowed the message to sit, knowing that acknowledgement was now optional, not necessary. He had achieved success for himself, not to prove anything to her. At a celebratory dinner with Mr. Rao and a few close advisors, Arav reflected on the journey. "It's surreal," he admitted. "Just a few months ago, I was humiliated, dismissed, and publicly mocked. Now I feel empowered." Mr. Rao nodded. "Empowered, yes. But remember, Arav, the true measure is not in public accolades, but in how you maintain your integrity, your focus, and your drive. You've reclaimed control of your life, and that's something no one can take from you." Arav smiled. "You're right. I've learned that respect and credibility are earned, not given. And that sometimes the people who mock you are the ones who inadvertently push you to be better." It wasn't long before Arav began encountering Chandni in professional circles. She approached him at a networking event, carefully poised, clearly aware of his growing reputation. "Arav," she said, "your platform is impressive. I have to admit, I underestimated you." He gave a polite nod. "Thank you, Chandni. I appreciate that." She hesitated, then added, "Would you consider collaborating on a project? I think your insight could be invaluable." Arav considered the offer. He didn't feel the need for vengeance, but he recognized the strategic opportunity. With calm deliberation, he replied, "I'll review the proposal carefully. If it aligns with my goals, I'll consider it." For the first time, Arav felt fully in control, not only of his career, but of the narrative. Chandni's previous mockery no longer defined him. Her opinion had weight only because he chose to allow it. That realization was profoundly liberating. By the end of the year, Arav's platform had expanded internationally. Investors sought him out. Tech publications featured his story, and he was invited to speak at major industry summits. The man who had once been labeled a failure now commanded respect in ways Chandni could never have imagined at her wedding. Chandni, watching from the sidelines of professional success, could only acknowledge his rise silently. Arav's journey had become a testament to perseverance, strategic thinking, and unwavering self-belief. The humiliation of the past had transformed into a story of triumph, and the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Arav knew that true victory wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to himself that he could endure, adapt, and succeed on his own terms. And as he looked toward the future, with new projects, investments, and possibilities on the horizon, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. For the first time, he realized that success was not just about wealth, recognition, or validation. It was about reclaiming one's dignity, mastering one's path, and emerging from adversity stronger than ever before. Months had passed since Arav's platform had launched to acclaim. What had started as a small idea, nurtured under Mr. Rao's mentorship, had now become a significant player in the tech industry. Arav's once fragile reputation had solidified into credibility, respect, and influence. Yet despite the success, there remained one lingering thought. Chandni. The memory of her laughter at his wedding was no longer painful, but it lingered like a faint echo, a reminder of the humiliation that had once threatened to define him. Arav had learned to detach himself from her opinions, but now, as he prepared for the company's first major international expansion, he realized that he might finally see her again in a professional setting. It happened sooner than expected. Arav was invited to speak at a high-profile investors' conference in Mumbai. Among the audience were industry leaders, venture capitalists, and notable entrepreneurs, people who mattered. When he walked onto the stage, confident, composed, and commanding attention, Arav caught sight of a familiar figure in the front row. Chandni. She was seated elegantly, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed a mixture of surprise and curiosity. He took a deep breath, remembering the woman who had once mocked his failed career, and the journey that had brought him here. He allowed himself a small private smile. This was no longer about her. This was about him, his work, his perseverance, his vision. The presentation was flawless. Arav spoke with clarity, passion, and authority. He described the platform, the problem it solved, the value it brought to small businesses and investors alike. Each statistic, each case study, and each projected outcome demonstrated not just competence, but mastery. The audience was captivated. When he finished, applause erupted. Investors approached, offering partnerships, asking for deeper discussions, and seeking ways to collaborate. Arav felt the weight of months of work, sleepless nights, and relentless effort finally lift, replaced with a profound sense of accomplishment. After the presentation, Chandni approached. This time there was no mockery, no pointed comments, just a measured acknowledgement. Arav, she said softly, I have to admit, you've exceeded everything I imagined. I misjudged you. Arav looked at her calmly, a composed smile on his lips. Thank you, Chandni. I appreciate your acknowledgement. The important thing is that the work speaks for itself, not past assumptions. She nodded, slightly embarrassed, yet respectful. Arav could sense the shift. The woman who had once belittled him was now forced to reckon with the fact that he had created a reality she could not mock, dismiss, or control. Over the following weeks, Arav's success continued to snowball. New investors were eager to come on board. Partnerships formed. Media outlets profiled him as a rising star in tech entrepreneurship. The man who had once been labeled a failure now commanded the respect of the industry. Even within his personal circle, there was a noticeable shift. Friends who had doubted him, acquaintances who had whispered about his missteps, and even distant colleagues began to seek advice, mentorship, and guidance. Arav realized that true power lay not just in wealth or recognition, but in the ability to influence, inspire, and lead through competence and integrity. One evening, as Arav reviewed projections for the next expansion phase, he received an unexpected call. It was Chandni. I wanted to congratulate you personally, she said, her voice cautious but sincere. I've been watching your progress, and it's remarkable. Arav smiled gently. Thank you, Chenni. I'm glad you recognize the work behind the results. There was a pause on the line. Then she asked, almost hesitantly, do you think there's a way we could collaborate professionally? I believe our networks could benefit each other. He considered the offer carefully. There was no bitterness, no need for revenge, only strategic consideration. I'll review the proposal, he said finally. If it aligns with our goals, I'll consider it. For the first time, Arav felt complete control over the interaction. Shani's opinion no longer dictated his emotional state. He had reclaimed authority over his life, his career, and his narrative. The platform's success became a story of inspiration. Entrepreneurs from across the country reached out, sharing their struggles, asking for advice, and celebrating Arav's journey. The narrative of humiliation at a wedding had transformed into one of perseverance and ultimate triumph. Even Mr. Rao expressed pride, not just in Arav's professional achievements, but in the maturity, resilience, and integrity he displayed. You didn't just succeed in business, Mr. Rao said one evening. You proved that character, persistence, and strategic thinking matter more than any opinion or insult ever could. Arav nodded, realizing the truth in the statement. Chandni's mockery had been painful, but it had been a turning point, a moment that forced him to define himself by action rather than words. He had turned humiliation into motivation, doubt into determination, and opportunity into success. Finally, the day came when Arav's platform launched its international expansion. Investors, media, and partners celebrated the milestone. Chandni, now a spectator rather than an antagonist, observed from a distance, witnessing the culmination of his achievements. She understood, perhaps too late, that her assumptions had been entirely wrong. Arav, standing amidst the applause, the cameras, and the congratulatory messages, felt a sense of closure. The humiliation, the ridicule, and the laughter that had once wounded him now seemed insignificant. What mattered was what he had built, the integrity he had maintained, and the respect he had earned. He knew that Chenni's acknowledgement was no longer necessary. His life, his work, and his achievements spoke for themselves. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, and Arav was in command of his destiny. That night, as he reflected on the journey, Arav understood the true lesson. Success was not about proving someone wrong or seeking revenge. It was about resilience, growth, and the courage to pursue one's vision despite setbacks and ridicule. He had learned that the people who mocked him would always exist, but their words held power only if he allowed it. Arav closed his laptop, looking at the messages of congratulations from investors, partners, and friends. He felt a sense of pride and peace he had never known before. Chandni's laughter, once haunting, was now irrelevant. He had created a reality in which he no longer needed validation from anyone who had doubted him. In that quiet, triumphant moment, Arav realized something profound. His journey had transformed him, not just professionally, but personally. He had learned to harness disappointment, embrace opportunity, and build a life defined by achievement, integrity, and self-respect. And as he looked toward the horizon of future possibilities, Arav knew one simple truth. He would never allow anyone else's perception of failure to dictate the path of his life again. More stories will keep coming, so please don't forget to like and subscribe.